Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today, for the Season 2 premiere, I am so excited to be joined by Drew Hitz. Drew is an internationally renowned soloist, clinician, and speaker, having appeared in over 40 states and 30 countries. He has appeared with the National Symphony Orchestra, Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, Utah Symphony Orchestra, U.S. Army Blues, Alarm Will Sound, and the Marine Band of Mexico. Drew is also proud to serve on the board of directors for the Mockingbird Foundation, a nonprofit which has awarded grants in all 50 states totaling over $1.9 million to help bring music education to children. Drew, say hi.
What's up? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on. I'm very excited to talk about Phish with you today, and I'm very excited to get back into it after our summer hiatus.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, anyone who knows you on the internet, at least, should probably be able to predict what song we're going to be talking about today, because you kind of have a special relationship with it.
Mahler too?
Just a little bit. So we're going to be talking about Mike's song. Not only do you really like this song, but you have quite a story around it as well, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Would you, for those that don't know the story, would you mind telling it?
No, not at all. So I have been obsessed. I was obsessed for years with Phish bringing the second jam, as it's called, in Mike's song back, which is when after the first jam, which is always in F sharp minor, which also used to be called the Tramps segment, which because like way back in the day, they used to actually jump on trampolines during that part of Mike's song, although that predates me by like a year. The second jam is when they would modulate down a half step to F major and then would proceed to play a lot more Mike song, which is good. And they had not done that after the Polaris version in the summer of 2000. I think it was 7/15, might be 7/14, 2000. And so I made it my mission to try and get the band to bring the second jam back. And in 2013, I had the privilege of performing with the National Symphony when Trey Anastasio soloed with the orchestra. Amazing. And afterwards, after the concert, it's really hard to get out of the parking garage at the Kennedy Center. And so the orchestra, after a concert, like they all like throw their instruments in cases and then they run down the stairs or down the elevator. And then they're like out before most of us are even out into the main hall. So meaning that the backstage was empty. It was Trey, his manager, and me, and that was basically it for like all of backstage. And Trey's door was open, and I went and I asked him if I could be a pain in the ass Phish fan, and he smiled because we had like 4 conversations over the 2 days leading up to that. Mm-hmm. And he smiled and said sure, and then I told him about the second jam, and he was eating something, and he paused. He was like, he said, I have absolutely no recollection of that happening whatsoever. And then I said, that's what we thought. I figured that he just hadn't thought about it. And he then said, he said, well, if we play it again, know that it's because of you, because like I had no memory of that. So I was like, okay, so I felt pretty good leaving there. Well, fast forward to that summer, I was on tour out in Gunnison, Colorado, I think it was. And my phone is blowing up. I'm actually in a meeting and my phone is blowing up. And I know that Phish is playing Mike's song. And I know that this is like the first time that they've played Mike's song since. And I know it's either, and it turns out they, of course, did not play the second jam. And it was all of my friends telling me that I sucked and that I was useless. And, it was very funny. So then fast forward to summer of 2015. So it was a couple of years and many Mike songs that it didn't happen. 2015 in Nashville, my good friend Don Hart got me into the sound check and talked.
Quick side note: Don Hart, for those that don't know, is the phenomenal composer and arranger that did all the string parts for the Beacon jams.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, he's just a wonderful human. I was backstage with him talking with Trey before the 8/4/15 Nashville show. And then I had a little bit of an opening, like maybe 10 or so minutes, 15 minutes into the conversation. And I said to Trey again, "Hey, can I be a pain in the ass Phish fan for just a second?" And he gave me the same smile and he said, "Go for it." And then, he said, "Yeah, be honest." He said, "I can take it," which was very funny. And then I reminded him about the Mike song jam and the second jam. And then he's like, yeah. And he was trying to, and then I was like talking him through because he was asking where they went into it. And so I'm trying to explain like the 3-chord thing about how it happens 4 times,
Yeah.
but they only do it twice and then drop down. And then he said, and then he was like, he was kind of following along, but kind of not. And then I was like, "Would you like to hear it?" And he goes, "Yeah." And because I'm a psychopath, I then pulled my phone out and then just hit play because I had
You had it ready just in case.
I had it literally queued up to right before that segment started. So he's like cupping his hands and then he heard it and I was like, and now it goes down a half step and he goes like, "Oh," and then he seemed very interested. And actually the from a marketing standpoint, the thing I said was, "Hey, how would you like to break Twitter?" That was what I said. And he was like, "Yeah, well, yeah." He's like, what do you got?" And so that's when I was like, reminded him, played it for him. And and then it happened that night. So
he did it differently that night though. He didn't do it.
That's because they didn't even
properly.
talk about it backstage. Like they kind of because it seems obvious because he went over and talked to Paige for like a while, for like a good 20 seconds, and then he went back and talked to Fishman for a while, and there was like a back and forth, and I'm like, "Oh my God, is this happening?" And Don is like looking at me, and I was like. And then they dropped in. I was like, "Oh my!" And that's when my phone started blowing up because I had tweeted earlier that I had played it for him.
Yeah,
and, And then my phone was like the notifications on Twitter were just.
What was your feeling when they started doing the full closing chord segment?
I remember I tweeted no
at
go
at the third one.
and and I was like he's like I was wondering, I was like, is he trolling me? Which if he was, like, hats off, and then he dropped and then launched and then I started actually I tweeted like 50 random characters like in a row, just exclamation points and at symbols and whatever. And
that's a moment on tape. It's just like the crowd goes nuts and it's amazing.
Yeah, it was all. I initially I just did the touchdown symbol and then I started losing it. So,
yeah.
But that is a way to get 3,000 Phish followers within 24 hours is to,
oh my God.
It's like, I had something like 7,000 or something. And 3,000 of those came between 9 p.m. Central on 8/4/15 and like 9 p.m. the next night on 8/5. So it was pretty funny.
That's great. Well, that Mike song jam is pretty great, and they did another one later in summer 2015 at Alpine, which
correct.
It's shorter and very overlooked, I think, because I've never really heard anyone talk about it, but it's still great.
And then I saw the one after that, which was Raleigh. And they didn't do it, and they had sound checked Mike's songs. They obviously figured out that they weren't doing it in the right place, and then they sound checked it in Raleigh and couldn't figure it out. And then,
oh, really?
Yep. And then when they didn't do it, I knew it was done for a while until it came back at the Baker's Dozen, which we're about to talk about.
Speaking of, so the Baker's Dozen, me being the 3.0 kid that I am, that's my pick for my favorite Mike song. Mm-hmm. And yours, people who follow you on Twitter see you rant and rave about this jam all the time, which is the New Year's 1995 Mike song.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about why that one is your favorite, why you love it so much?
Sure. The December 95 is my favorite month in Phish history. If I had to choose one, then that is it for a number of reasons. But this Mike song is kind of like the perfect culmination of the entire fall 95, December 95, and it's creative on a number of levels. When they started it, it was for nerds like me who keep track of this kind of thing, it was very confusing because there was it was like the second set was almost over, and then you got set break, and then you've got you have to start the third set at a very specific time on New Year's Eve, because there has to be you can't have your countdown at 12:10. It's got to be at midnight. And so
Or
when
in
Phish,
2016's case, 11:58.
yeah, well, yes, exactly. So yeah, it seems like things have been going wrong on New Year's as of late, but including band members trapped above Madison Square Garden. But
I know. This year the gag will not involve anyone in the air.
I would guess not. I would guess not. At least not Trey in the air. Yeah, that would be my guess. But
Guaranteed, he makes a joke about it.
yeah, that's probably he is. Yep, us dads. You get to a certain age, and the humor gets. I've never met your dad. I bet a lot of his humor is pretty predictable. You can probably
Yes,
see
absolutely.
like 3/4 of it coming from like 5 days away if you're paying attention.
Yeah,
but it's our brand.
Back to the jam.
Back to the jam. Mike's the Mike song started at like a little bit before 11 o'clock, and it's like, what the hell is going on here? Because they need time to set the stage. It was very, very confusing because of course they had never, to my knowledge, and if I'm wrong, you should email Ryan and complain. Don't email me. But they had never played a Mike song to close a set. They had done Mike's Auld Lang Syne Weekapog before. They did that New Year's '92, but the Mike song, which if you haven't heard that, it's actually awesome because Trey does the countdown while they're playing the Mike's jam.
Ooh.
And he at one point he like screams, because that was when he was young and would scream a lot. He like screams, "We've got 1.5 minutes left in this year, everybody, make it good," and then just goes, "Wow!" He just screams like while he's ripping into Mike's song, which is very cool. But that was like the start of set 3. They walked out to play Mike's song, which went into a countdown, Auld Lang Syne Weekapog. This one, they played a Mike song, which ended up like the second jam ended up like dissolving into this wall of sound. And then that, a loop jam, which he had played in a few other, we used to call it a big show jam because it only happened on legendary nights like the Providence Bowie from a year and 2 days beforehand. So then that loop, like emerged out of that wall of sound chaos while the rest of the band all walked off stage. And so it's just Trey on the stage with his pedals and his guitar. And that was this crazy creative thing. And then it kind of died down. And then he said, "Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 15 minutes," and then walked off. And then they came back and then did like the time machine thing. And then, and then Auld Lang Syne, countdown, Auld Lang Syne, and then proceeded to play the greatest Weekapog ever played. So that Mike's jam has a set break in the middle of it. It has like, my favorite Auld Lang Syne, believe it or not. Which
you have a favorite Auld Lang Syne?
It's that one because
only the most hardcore Phish fans.
It's more like hardcore music nerds because the Auld Lang Syne from New Year's '95, Trey specifically, his use of ornamentation is like Paul McCartney singing "Hey Jude" level amazing. Meaning that if you listen to "Hey Jude," then Paul McCartney does not add a lot of extra notes at all until like many times through the melody, because it's this beautiful melody, and there's a lot of singers these days who will I saw a basketball game 2 years ago where at this Wizards game, the young woman singing the national anthem, singing our national anthem, which is not a good song to begin with. I'm jealous of yours. Yours is much better up there in Canada. Love to trade, but but she sang. It was like, "Oh, say."
Yeah, it's like a
she had to breathe after
long song. And it's like 5 minutes.
She had to breathe after the word "say." It's "Oh, say, can you see" is the first half of the first phrase, and she had to breathe after the second word. And which is fine, but that's not my speed. But if you listen to Trey's use of embellishment in that Auld Lang Syne, I've used it as an example for students like quite a bit of how to, add just a little bit. It's like, you can't put so much seasoning on food that it like only tastes like the seasoning. or else you ruin the food.
You got a
So
point.
yeah, I love the whole that whole Mike's groove is just is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a great Mike song. I will say, you're not going to like me for this, but I'm not as hot on it as you are. I think the jam before the deconstruction around the 14-minute mark is like going places, and I think when it kind of moves into that wall of sound kind of thing, that's where it kind of loses me a little bit. Like that's part of why I don't like the mid 90s jamming as much as 3.0 or the later 90s,
Yep.
just because it feels kind of disjointed to me, and it, like to me when I was listening to it yesterday, it was just the grooves going along, and then suddenly it's just Fishman just stops and just goes on cymbals, and then it's just noise. And I mean, it's there are lots of noise jams later in their career that feel like it's still like moving and still like has a purpose, like something like a lot of the synthed out crazy jams from this year. There's still like a direction to the jam, I find, but this one feels like they're all kind of playing on their own, which it might be kind of the appeal, but to me, that's not as good as something like, the Baker's Dozen version, which I picked, which doesn't break particularly like new or exciting ground, but it's just a great, Baker's Dozen Bliss peak jam. I think also, it's cool looking at it because at the time, like, were you at? Did you say you were at the Baker's Dozen for that show?
I was. This was the first Baker's Dozen show I caught. Was this
Yeah.
one? Yep.
So at that point, when they opened the second set with Mike's, seeing the Baker's Dozen before that, were you fairly certain that it was going to be a second jam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So no, actually,
Really?
well, I just because they hadn't done it in years, I mean, I at set break I was speaking with some of my old friends and Mike Lowe, who you probably know from Twitter,
Yep.
who's a fellow musician. He was saying like they were going to play a second jam and that it was going to be that night. And I told him he was full of crap. And I was like, it's not going to happen. And he was like, mark my words. And then so we were not sitting together. I was sitting with like three other longtime Phish friends that I've been seeing Phish with since the early mid '90s. But then Mike still to this day enjoys pointing out that I was full of crap when I told him that he was full of crap.
So what was it like for you being in the room when they executed the drop into the second jam properly?
Well, they almost did. Actually, Mike did not go down the half step like right away. Like yeah, it's still slightly, it's yeah.
But they did it at the right time.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But in terms of, it was like they didn't like stick the landing. I was very. I mean, every Mike song from 2000. Well, it's not like we knew that they weren't going to be doing second jams like in after that Polaris
right.
But everyone especially once it became apparent that they didn't do that anymore, that was I was hoping it would come back when they came back for 3.0, and then when they played it in Hampton. There's been a lot of Mike songs that I think it's one of their best, like just like let's go exploring songs. And so when they happen super late in sets, with the exception of New Year's '95, which is like the weird one with a set break in the middle of the Mike's groove, I'm always bummed because it just kind of takes the jamming off the table, basically, because if you've got 30 minutes left in the set, then
it's going to be like a Mike's Farmhouse Weekapog, something like that.
Even if it's a hydrogen, it's going to be paint by numbers because it has to be, because you can't, you're not just going to play until midnight,
Right. I'm hoping that this fall we see it come back, especially with the strong summer that Mike's had relative to the last decade or so. We had the amazing jammed out version from Deer Creek. The Shoreline one really stretched its legs. Like they've been letting it breathe a little bit more.
Yes, they have.
Yeah,
it's good. I like. I just, it's always everything's about managing expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't get upset when they don't go exploring when they play Farmhouse, because like which is like a perfectly fine song that I don't really ever need to see them play it again, because I've seen it like, I don't know, I've seen it 25 times. I saw them play it on Letterman live. It's just
Right.
like, I'm good with that. But Mike's song has the potential, not like living in the past, even just today, as like this amazing vehicle for a very interesting conversation. So when it's just like, it's just kind of going through the motions, then it's always a letdown.
Yeah, it's one of those things. There have been a few versions the last few years that have come like opening or early in a second set where I've thought like maybe they'll do it here.
Yeah.
But then they don't. But I'm hoping like, I'm hoping this fall we get a jammed out Mike's. Obviously, like someday I think we're gonna get a jammed out AC/DC bag again. Someday. They teased us with it by opening the second set at Deer Creek with it.
Right.
It's a pretty good set.
Yeah.
Otherwise, without that.
Sure.
Opening the second set at the Baker's Dozen with it too was also a big tease.
Right.
But I'm hopeful that we get something like that. And with like, I don't think anyone thought the Halley's Jam was ever coming back, but then it did.
Yeah.
So anything's possible with this band, really.
Anything is possible. Yeah, Bag is an interesting tune because there's actually not, even historically, there's not very many jammed out bags at all. Like it's a very, now the Boise one from 99 and the 1230 97 from MSG. I mean, those are two of the greatest Phish jams ever played for my taste.
I agree on Boise, not as much on the 1230 97.
Really?
That's a chat for another episode.
There you go. We have a very different taste in Phish, because first of all, like all that noise stuff is like summer 95. Like, yeah, I was probably the only person at the Mud Island show that when the tweezer ended after 51 minutes, I was pissed that they ripcorded it. Like I was ready for that to go for another hour and a half. But yeah,
I stuff like that, like a lot of the 50-minute jams like that, like the Worcester Runaway Gym from 97. Like I have a hard time sitting through that whole thing.
Yeah.
But something like the Shoreline Soul Planet, I can get through no problem.
Sure. But that 1230 97 bag, I have tweeted before that someone should form a religion with that jam as the central, like, higher power.
That over Boise, huh?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they're different. That it's interesting because you're such a Page fan. That 1230 97 bag, that has some of the best Page playing, I think, that he's ever done in his career. In the middle of that, yeah.
I'll have to go back to that later today. But yeah, I think, I mean, we're now talking about a different song, but
sorry.
No, that's part of the fun. Tangents are part of the open-ended nature of this podcast. It's great.
I'm known for tangents off of tangents.
It's great.
Yeah, as the host, you're the one who has to bring it back, which you're doing right now very professionally.
I was actually going to say something about the Boise bag first, but we were eventually going to circle back.
Great.
The Boise one, I think, also has some phenomenal Page playing in a very different way to the 97 one, I think. It's just, in the more ambient 99 style, like his piano and that first ambient section is amazing, and then that groove at the end, his synth with the CS60 is phenomenal. That jam to me is like the two jams from 1.0 that I really like, that I probably have in my top 10 list, are that and the Lakewood 97 Ghost.
Oh, there you go.
Like
that one's
that one. The Lakewood Ghost is one of my favorite Phish jams of all time.
That's that thing is that's a heater.
Yeah,
that's and I had not heard any there. I hadn't gotten any tapes yet from Europe 97, which was right before that tour. So the first time that I ever heard the song Ghost was in Virginia Beach, on the 21st.
Oh yeah.
And then like 2 days later, there was, then they're playing it in Atlanta and playing that version. It was just, that was, what an embarrassment of riches.
That's also, the Trey screaming in the middle of the jam.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, back to Mike's song.
Hey, what are we here to talk about?
What's this episode called anyway? So for me, I think the one thing that the New Year's 95 version definitely has over the Baker's Dozen version is the strength of the Type 1 section. which is very typical for 1995 over 2017. It's
Mm-hmm.
faster. Trey's playing is more agile, I guess. And yeah, so it has that. But for me, I really like going back and like how smoothly they kind of go back and forth between Page and Trey leading every so often in the Baker's Dozen version. There was a moment, where is it? I'm looking through my notes. Can't find it in my notes right now. But there was a moment when I was listening to it last night where I was struck by how smoothly it went from Trey soloing to him stepping back to rhythm and Page leading on the whirly
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, and the way he brings the synth in around 13 and a half minutes to me, just like this jam kind of really exemplifies the kind of comfortable, safe jams that they were able to pull off every night of the Baker's Dozen. Like, this isn't going to crazy new places like um, the Baker's Chalk Dust, for example, but
Mm-hmm.
it's in a way like the simple that would come on the last night. It's just like, we're here, like we're really fucking good at this kind of jam, and we're gonna play it amazingly.
That's well put.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well put. To circle back to the first jam, I would yeah, it is. It's a little slower, but it's also the feel is a lot different for the first jam.
Very.
The one complaint that I have had overall for Mike Sung for a long time now, like all through 3.0 and including 4.0, is although, as you said, it's gotten a lot more interesting. I don't need a second jam. I just want Mike Sung to be interesting and for me to not know exactly where it's going. It's like,
Right.
is kind of like what I'm looking for there. But if you listen to, it's not just Trey, it's all four of them. There's a real like driving intensity in December 95 Mike
Yeah.
songs that extended all the way through 96 as well. Which is not my favorite year of Phish, especially considering like what's on either side of it. Although like the highlights are glorious, but there's it's very much leaning forward, and it is it's like driving angry a little bit, even when it's not loud. It's possible to drive angry at a medium and lower dynamic, which is totally missing in 3.0 and 4.0 in that section.
Right, and that's very much the vibe of 95 and a lot of 1.0 stuff and 2.0 even. Like there was a lot more darkness and anger in the band, which I mean, there's not as much darkness and anger in the band, but they can still have a really good time getting to really weird places. It's just, yeah, you're right. It's a different vibe because also, they're 30 years older almost, and they're different people now.
Yep. Yeah, although yes, they are. I will say that for me as a musician, and when I'm teaching or coaching people, music is all about contrast. Everything is about contrast, and when the New Year's 95 mics, with the exception of like when it dissolves into the wall of sound, is not a particularly angry or amped up mic song. I mean, there's urgency there, but to me, the whole the intensity of it, and then that wall of sound like that sets up the fact that the Weekapog, which is like one of the best tension and release examples that the band has ever done, and that style of jamming, it makes it that much more glorious. When one thing that I have at times with Phish in 3.0 and some in this last tour, which I loved in 4.0, is that when the band doesn't seem to have much happening in terms of a jam, there's just nothing that's really all that interesting, which happens. That's what it's called, improvisational music. It's like it's impossible to have a really interesting conversation every single time if
right.
you're or else you're not taking any chances. And if you're not taking any chances, then it's maybe never not interesting. It's also never super interesting either. And hanging out in the middle is lame, right? And lots of bands do that. So that's not a diss. But when there's nothing that's really going on, they have this propensity of late to modulate up a perfect fourth and then play in a major key and then do like a bliss jam, which they're really good at that. And in the moment, like that's fun and nice, but those are the kind of jams I like never go back and listen to again.
Well, that's kind of what they do in the Baker's version.
Well, it is, except that it is, and yet it didn't, to me, feel, and this is my judgment, which you can completely take or leave, but that one did not feel like it was one of those modulations where they just didn't know what else to do, so they modulated and then
right. It felt like a purposeful.
Yes,
let's do this. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and so but for me, one complaint that I have had of over the last 12 years of Phish is that the lower, softer dynamics from a band-wide perspective have almost completely disappeared. And what I mean by that is that if you listen to any of the Trey Anastasio band tour that just happened, there were moments where, like, I saw the DC show here at the Anthem, which was incredible. Talking about Farmhouse before, they played Farmhouse, and like in the middle of that jam, Trey started getting softer, and Desron almost, he didn't stop playing, but it like almost disappeared. Fishman immediately went with it. It was like whisper quiet. Every Slave jam from 1994, right when the jam starts, it's like triple piano.
Nothing. Yeah.
It's like there's not. And now at that point in a Slave, and it's beautiful what he plays, but Mike plays a lot of notes and it's loud. It's like a bass solo right there.
Yeah.
But to me, like when, if the mountaintop is here, it's like, and you start here, it's not as good as if you start here, if the build is the point.
Right. And I think not jam wise, but this year they've been really good at, like, I mean, they've been playing a lot of the ballads really, really well. Stuff like The Lonely Trip, Mountains in the Mist has been amazing.
Yes.
And a jam that comes to mind that's kind of recent that does the kind of quiet dynamic shift that you're talking about is the Albany 2018 Show of Life. That one, I mean, easily the best version of the song. But it,
Although I will, since you disparaged 95 jamming, I'll disparage Show of Life, and I will say that the greatest version of that song ever is not the highest bar to clear.
yeah, it's still that jam to me. It's just it sticks out in 2018 because it's a lot more patient in a mostly type 1 jam that you don't get a lot in recent years, and I think it's phenomenal. And I talk about fall 2018 endlessly.
Yes, you do.
But
you talk about fall 2018 as much as I talk about Phish.
Fair. That's fair.
That's a great tour. But so to loop back in terms of like everything is about contrast to me. And so when there are times now this summer, Mike's song did not feel this way to me. But when like the first jam in Mike's, or meaning like the only jam, when it kind of feels like they're driving like with one foot on the gas pedal, but also one foot over the brake pedal. So you just like, like they just keep on like the brake lights just keep kind of, flickering on and off.
Right.
Rather than just go. Right. Mike's song used to be like a cab driver in Manhattan, where it was just like they were like diving for green lights, like, swerving, like court vision, like knowing what lane they need to be in at what intersection to get like through like 3 seconds faster. And now it's like, it can be much more passive, which again, when the times when I have been, felt like things were lacking of late is when the soft dynamics are kind of middle and the fast tempos are a little bit slower, and the like the real driving stuff is a little bit less driving. It's kind of this like, it can be this like, it recedes like to the mean kind of thing. And so much of music is about contrast, and I'm 6'4". I'm very tall. However, if I was in a team photo with the Washington Wizards, first of all, you'd be like, "Who's the old dude?" Because I'm 46. But you would not call me tall, and I'm actually taller than like I'm taller than more than one or two members of the Toronto Raptors, right? But there's like a whole bunch of people who are taller than me as well. It's all about, everything is about contrast,
right?
And so and so that it felt like the contrast was starting to come back. Although this tab tour that just happened, again, the soft dynamics, Phish has not played anything where the bottom dropped out like it did in 3 different places in that 10-1-21 Trey show, like since like 1994. I don't think. I mean, it's been like a long time.
I'm gonna blame Mike becoming a really good and assertive bass player.
Well, yes. I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's it does seem like it is him that doesn't go.
Yeah, because I think it's a difference between Mike's role in Phish and Desron's role in Tab. Like Tab is there to support Trey. Phish, they're all they're an even playing field. So Mike is an equal part of the band and is very much a lead player. Like they're all lead players. In Tab, Desron's there to complement what Trey's doing and, push Trey on. But at the end of the day, like if he sees Trey going down, he's going to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I will push back the a little bit. You didn't quite say this, but there have always been people over the years that say that that Phish is a democracy. It's not. It's like not spoken, but it's Trey's band. Trey decides what they play.
Absolutely.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but there are a lot of people who think that Phish is completely. It's like, no, if you want to get like the second jam to come back,
you don't talk to Page.
You can't. And he might be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But no, it's like Trey is the one who.
Right.
Yeah. At no point does Mike walk over to Trey in the middle of a set and be like, mutter for 25 seconds about some psycho fan who had his cell phone queued up to a jam that he heard, and then go over to Page and be like, hey, there was this tall psycho dude who played blah, 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 and then say to me, that just doesn't happen. So it is Trey's band. But I just wish that this is something that before I saw Phish, I had seen I had seen so many rock concerts. I
Sorry,
was
when was your first show again?
12/31/93. So it was
Got it.
New
Oh,
Year's
great show.
93. Yes.
Legendary
Uh,
Hood.
yeah, that was the first time I ever heard the song Harry Hood was
Oh,
and I was 10th row center, just like
oh.
it was like Trey played it for me. So which also I'm guessing the person who was 9th row center thought that Trey was playing it for them, and we're all right. So
Yeah.
but before I ever saw Phish, like I had seen Guns N' Roses twice. I'd seen Metallica. I'd seen AC/DC. I'd seen Aerosmith and U2 and Faith No More and Living Color. Like the list goes on and on and on and on. Pearl Jam and none of those bands did what Phish did dynamically. Like none of them. And even Metallica didn't play louder or more furiously than Phish did in like a 94 Split Open and Melt,
Oh, yeah.
which was just like absolute. I mean, that was 94 Split Open and Melts when they got going were like a cab driver in Manhattan who was like on meth. I mean, that's like that's what a 94 Melt jam. But then they would also perfect example is 7/9/94 Great Woods, which is which is probably my favorite Split Open and Melt that I've ever seen. The end of that's like a typical 94 melt. It's like it's unbelievable. And then at the very end, it diminuendos and it diminuendos and it diminuendos and it goes down to absolutely nothing. Again, this is like the part of Melt in 94 when like they're like, there usually sounds like
Up,
they're like
up, up.
sacrificing animals. Yeah, like in some sort of like a ritual, and it just goes down to absolutely nothing. And then it ends, and then it like just huge surge at the very end to like this crazy explosive ending. That to me, like Phish does not play with that level, and that was in a packed Great Woods amphitheater. This is not like
a small theater. Yeah.
This is not 3,000 person or 1,500 person. Yeah, this is
Right.
not the Rock Pile in Toronto, right? This was a gigantic cookie cutter amphitheater. I do wish that they would, and this is not a living in the past thing. This is not a gatekeeper thing before anybody, and like, because people think that, and it's bullshit. I like music with contrast, and that's just they happen to have played with it back then, and that's just one thing. I don't want them to sound like it's 94 again, although I wouldn't turn that down. But like, I just wish that they would explore the bottom dynamics, more, because I think it's just. My mentor, Sam Palafian, used to say that our number one tool as musical storytellers is dynamics. And that's really important. And they play with dynamic contrast, but they used to play with dynamic contrast that I had literally never heard from any rock band before or since.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just a rock band who's really good at playing with dynamic contrast, but it's not a holy shit, I can't believe how much ground they cover kind of a thing, if that makes sense.
Right. I would say, I've said for a while, and I had this thought probably a year or two ago, the perfect Phish would be their 94 bodies with their 2021 brains. Have their knowledge and improvisational, years now just with their chops of the mid 90s.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Just because then you get the absolute greatness of improvisation, which in my opinion has never been better. I've been saying that since like 2013, but I haven't been right. I've only been right since like 2018.
Yeah, if you were saying during summer 2016 that was as good as Phish Improv gets, that's a that's an uphill. That's like eating a McDonald's. Be like, this is the finest meal I have ever eaten in my life.
And also, I didn't hear a note of 1.0 consciously until like 2017. So
interesting.
Yeah, when I was younger, I listened to the shows that I had on my iPod, which were like 6/24/12 that I was at, a couple of New Year's shows that I had streamed, and a few assorted other shows that like my dad had been at or we had just gotten downloads of for some reason.
Oh.
And so as finally in like late 2017. My friend was like, just listen to the Island Tour. And I was like, okay, I've never listened to anything from like the 90s. Like really, like I had gone back and like hit a couple of songs randomly, but this is the first time I was like, okay. And I listened to the whole Island tour and I was like, all right, like this is what all the hype's about in 1.0.
Right.
I still have always steadfastly stuck by my belief that 3.0 is better, but I'll die on that hill, as you know. That's why this podcast exists.
So now I'm curious, are you is it now like 3.0 and 4.0 are better, or is 3.0 better than 4.0, or
See,
like
so this
is the
is the
hill
thing.
changing?
This is the thing, because there hasn't been enough 4.0 for it to, like there's been one incredible tour, but that doesn't yet stand up to the bunch of like fall 2018, summer 2017, summer 2015, fall 2016, fall 2013. Like, I'm going to give it a few years, see where the band is in like 2024 or 2025, and then, reevaluate.
That's funny.
Once they hit their 40th year.
There you go.
We'll
Yeah,
see what happens.
I will say that one of the things that initially drew me to the band, like big time, like that night on New Year's '93, when it blew my mind, was how well they executed shockingly complicated songs. And that's something that like Foam, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like, or Fluffhead, or
The first time I heard that song, the first time I heard Foam, I was like, what the hell am I listening to? Like, this is ridiculous.
But what they used to do in terms of there were so many parallels with what I would see them do right in front of me in the early, if you 93, I guess just call it mid 90s, 93, 94, 95, that Phish had the ability, like Trey had the ability to play Foam and to nail the crap out of Foam faster than usual, slower than usual, loud, soft. Like he could, like, it was like a computer program where you could literally just like type in a new line of code to change one aspect, and it came out like that's how he had been playing it the entire time. And that was when, with that composed stuff, that Page could change the articulation on something like this much, and then Trey would, like, by the end of that measure, would change the articulation of his playing the exact same way.
Yeah.
And so they were and part of it is that in 94 they played Bowie, like, God, what's the numbers, like 40 times, 50 times, like in just 1994, just
right.
Bowie.
So many.
And yeah, and now, especially when they like try and play like 240 songs every year, which I've been advocating for repeats for a long time. Like, I keep tweeting that repeats are actually good, but like now there's all of that complicated stuff. It's again, it's like, it's kind of like, it's middle dynamics. It's like a middle tempo. It's like middle articulations. It's like, it's not nearly as intentional or nuanced. And that was a massive part of what drew me to the band to begin with.
Right.
Which is largely missing now.
I would say I agree with you that it was, missing a lot in 3.0. Like, I'd say what they the leaps and bounds in improvisation that they had over the 2009 to 2020, they sacrificed, not because they had to sacrifice it, but just because I guess they didn't practice the composed sections as much. They sacrificed a lot of the tightness, like, a lot of the Bowies and Fluffheads and, the Foam from Mohegan Sun in 2019. Like, Trey is just lost. And, that's just
hard.
I mean, but then you listen to the way they've been playing them this year. And it's like, a new life. And I hope that, Trey's newfound practice carries over for, not just this year. And hopefully it's not like an isolated thing like 2015 was, where, next year we have like a summer 2016 tour, which, knock on wood.
And I would rather have super interesting jams. If I have to choose one thing, I'd
Right.
rather have super interesting jams than well played tunes. But if I'm being honest, that was one of the things which absolutely blew my hair back, because as a musician, that was what I have spent thousands of hours in a practice room, like recording small chunks and then listening back at half speed to hear exactly whether, like, 4/16 notes are crunched, or whether the third one is moved a little to the left,
Oh,
or
okay.
whether all four of the articulations are exactly even. This is the level of work that like any professional musician has done. And it was obvious that Phish had done that much, just as much homework as I had. And that, although at that point it was more because I was young at that point, right? But that I was in the process of, and there are a small but very vocal minority of people on Twitter who think that if you like point any of this out, then you should give your tickets to someone who still likes the band, which is like the like complete absence of any like ability to think about anything deeply in that response is embarrassing.
Right.
Because like, and I'm not trying to get you to think like I am or to pay attention to this, and it's not, you wouldn't be more enlightened. I don't mean you, I mean anybody, right? I don't
Right.
mean Ryan, I mean any person. You wouldn't be more enlightened if you did, or but the fact that like someone would just completely discount the fact that a professional musician can really long for the days when they used to like execute on like a world class, like top 0.1% of all professional musicians
Yeah.
world level, and that they don't anymore, and that means I should sell my tickets, is kind of like, okay, good talk. Like you must be fun at parties.
Right.
So actually they probably are. They probably say that they have equal fun at all parties, because it's just otherwise they're judging parties, and they yeah, I just want to pat those people on the head. So.
Right. But yeah, I would just say, like, the composed sections of songs haven't sounded this good in, a long time. I think
It's
like
true. It's
stuff
true.
like the Nashville Fluffhead,
Yep.
like
Yep. I was there.
The Dix
Yep.
Bowie was nearly perfect. Just hearing Trey rip through those, um, you know, obviously not with the same intensity as he did in the 90s, but still playing it.
Yep.
When you compare the Nashville Fluffhead to something like the New Year's Eve 2017 Fluffhead, where Trey just doesn't play for a whole bunch of parts of it because he can't remember what it is.
Right.
Granted, like, obviously it's because he didn't practice them enough, but him going on stage and be like, all right, I'm going to remember this song that I wrote, 30 years ago that's incredibly complex that I haven't played in 6 months.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and it's also it's practice, but it's also reps. I mean, I don't care how hard you work in the practice room. There's a difference between being on stage and being in the practice room.
right.
And yeah, it's like, it is anytime, my white whale is I've never seen Alumni Blues, and but like A Letter to Jimmy Page in the middle of Alumni Blues, that is hard enough that like Trey cannot play that like one time a year. And like the version at Dick's, like he was leaving out notes. I mean, the middle of that is like don't digga digga dunk don't digga digga dunk don't digga digga, and he was going like dum da 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 ba dum da 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 ba dum. He wasn't
Right.
even don't digga digga da ba dum, and it was still like super clunky and like very very labored. And but that's the kind of, and he absolutely could nail the crap out of that if he took it into a practice room and slowed it down and recorded himself and listened and did like the thing,
Right.
but he's got like, he did that kind of stuff in 94, but he also wasn't like, he got married in 94, but like, he wasn't yet married. He didn't have kids. He didn't have sobriety to work on. He wasn't like doing all these it's like his life was guitar. So
Yeah.
it's like, so yeah, it's different life places, but it's interesting that the contrast. And
Right.
but it's amazing how creatively relevant they are now at this point in their career. Is amazing.
Yeah. And
Truly.
so before we wrap up, just because this is going to be coming out a few days before fall tour starts,
Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts? Like, what are you expecting from fall tour?
I because of Tab Tour and Trey and Fishman playing together and what happened in, this,
What
I'm
happened?
I'm not a and first let me I'm complaining about the complainers a lot, which some people enjoy, and then everyone else is like, oh god, shut up. But I just want to be clear that like heaping praise on Desron is not slighting Tony in the least.
Of course.
And well, but you say of course, but that's actually news to some people.
You're right.
And that saying how great Fishman, like how he pushed it, is not like
A slight to
throwing shit
Russ.
right
Yeah.
at all. And yet people don't get that. And it's also not minimizing like why Fishman was joined the tour was because like, like the
They got
regular
COVID.
drummer
Like,
got a
yeah.
life-threatening disease. It's like, okay, like, and that's like, and it sounds like they're all doing well, which is like awesome. That's
Yeah.
like a million times more important than how soft the freaking Farmhouse Jam got. I mean, like that's life, and this is just art, which is very important. But if we can just like set aside the COVID thing, or else we can't talk about the music at all. That Tab Tour, I believe that it's not just because Fishman joined. I think it's when he joined, and then the fact that the horns got pulled midstream. They had no rehearsal time other than what was like actually on the road, which meant
Right.
that
And that's why there were so many song repeats.
and that's also why they had to go so deep on so many songs. And so because they, like the Baker's Dozen, there was like this kind of unique set of circumstances that forced them to extend things. And I think that the Desron was like, he blew my mind with how much he pushed Trey. It sounded like he and Fishman had been touring together
Right?
for three
Like,
straight months.
oh my God.
I saw
The
the
rhythm
second
section.
I saw the second
Insane.
show. I saw the second show of the two of them playing together, and it sounded like they had been playing together for years.
And I'm sure you noticed this too. Trey and Ray's interplay
Mm-hmm.
during those shows was nuts. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard something like I've never heard it like that from the two of them before.
Change is good. The Baker's Dozen was change because it was like, okay, we got to fill like 13 shows without any repeats, right? That's like, and so it forced them to dig deep on a lot of jams, and it really paid off. And by the way, every single jam at the Baker's Dozen was not equally interesting. Like
Right.
it wasn't, because again, that's not how improvisational art works. It's impossible. And doesn't have to do with being prepared or more prepared, or that's just the way that improvisational music works. So let's see here. The what the Tab Tour did was, I mean, some of the jams that I saw, the Wolfman's encore from 10-1-21,
Yes.
almost 15 minutes long, and it's like, it is 100% type 1. It's like the analogy that I like to use is that I'm a huge fan of Monet. I retweet Monet paintings all the time. That if you are looking at a Monet painting, and a couple of times I've been lucky enough to be in an empty art museum and been able to just like spend like 5 full minutes with a Monet painting, just me and that painting. If you are standing there from 5 feet away, you then move up to 4 feet away. It's like it's the exact same painting, but in some ways it looks completely different.
Different
Or
perspective.
you stay at 5 feet and then you just like move over to the side a little bit. So it's just, like maybe instead of dead on, you're looking from like 10 degrees difference. It's again completely different, like just the way that the same, and that's exactly what Tab just did over and over and over again, was that it was a painting, but it felt like you kept on changing perspective, changing angle, changing depth, and it's real subtle stuff, which I could see a lot of people getting bored with. I mean, I could see how someone could get bored with. I didn't see people getting bored.
I
You
didn't get
understand
bored
what I mean?
with it.
No, yeah. Well, and yeah, it's if you did, you being anybody, again, it's not a slight, right?
Right.
But there was a lot of really subtle like conversations going on between Des and Fishman, Des and Trey and Fishman, of course. Especially that trio I found was really playing off of each other a lot. And I am curious to see if that carries over to Phish tour at all, where because in general nowadays Phish doesn't have much patience in terms of type 1 jamming, which we talked about before, which is that when it's not really going anywhere, it when they just like modulate and do a bliss jam right away, that's kind of like, in case of emergency break glass, it feels like they break glass quite a bit. Whereas the Trey band, they were obviously like, I don't think they decided that the Everything's Right was going to be 30 minutes, but I'm quite sure that they were like, we're taking this deep because there was only X number of tunes that they had been able to learn together.
Right.
And yeah, it's like, and every time they had to end a jam, Trey had to turn around all the way to Fishman and like signal him that it was ending, just because, like, again. But sometimes who was it that posted an Ernie Stiles, Trey's composition teacher, quote about how creativity happens when there are constraints. And that was one of those where like Trey is the one who is going to end the jam because it's the Trey Anastasio band. And so that in a lot of ways frees up everybody else on stage to just like go deep until you are told to do something else. And so there's no part of it where it's like being a completely passive passenger in a car, right? Like where if your dad is driving you somewhere, like, and you can just like, your dad is not looking for you to be like, hey, there's a light, up ahead that's been green for a while and it's probably going to turn red. You're passive, right? And it's funny that being passive in that sense, in a leadership sense, can free up so much deep conversations because you don't have to worry. It's like being a guest on a podcast versus the host, where I can just kind of go and then you steer us where we need to go. Where it's like, if the interview really sucks, it's the interviewer's fault, not the interviewee's fault. I'm just oversimplifying.
Is that your way of subtly blaming me for us not talking about Mike's song for like 80% of this episode?
That's complete. I'd forgotten about. But we're talking about. But
that's
it's
the
like,
topic. Exactly. That's the fun. This is actually, believe it or not, there's I believe at least one other episode where we talk less about the song that was picked. So, it feels like a great point to wrap up. We hit an hour.
My last point is that Mike's song, I think the good and the bad and the whatever, I think is very indicative of like the development of the band and about how, which is I think why we ended up going off on so many tangents because I think that there's like a lot of parallels with, and it's a tune that there were some. What was the Mike song Down South early in Summer Tour was. It was either Alabama or Alpharetta.
That weekend.
But and no one should go seek it out. It's like one of the worst Mike songs ever played. It's just like, well, it's super short. It's like
maybe. Oh no, yeah, because they did the short Weekapaug at Arkansas. I was gonna say
there's no urgency. It's just like it's just there. It's fine. It's totally fine. But like. It's like, but yeah, that's like, but then like where it went later in the tour was, but again, that was a late set one where it was like a paint by numbers. It's just like, yeah, it was just, and it was a little bit sloppy, but then it just like ended, and then the Weekapaug just kind of ended. And, those tunes I think are, should be judged within the framework of where they can go. And then the mics that you mentioned, from later in the tour, got real interesting, and they weren't super long and there was no second jams, but like very interesting stuff, like from the first measure of the first jam, so it's improvisational rock. There's times when it's good and there's times when it's not, and that's like which is what can make it special.
Right. And before we stop, I just occurred to me that I totally forgot to even mention the jammed out Mike song from fall 2018 from Nashville. That's also phenomenal. That everybody should go listen to.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Not a second jam, unfinished, and goes into one hell of a ghost too.
Yes, that was fun as hell. I was at that one too. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Drew, for coming on today. Really enjoyed this chat. And we're recording this on the 8th, so good luck on the MSG on sale.
Thank you
for both
very
of us.
much. And I wanted to thank you for putting this out into the world, because I know that I saw somebody posted, I think it was on Facebook, that like, what could a 18, 19, whatever year old kid at the time, like, what the hell insights is like. Those are people that don't have the courage to put out their own thing, because as soon as you put out a thing, then people can think that your thing sucks, right?
Right.
If you don't have a Phish podcast, there's no way that I could hear your Phish podcast and be like, Ryan's Phish podcast sucks.
Yeah.
So it takes courage to put stuff out.
Well, thank you.
And you don't need to be some 46-year-old dude with like low key lower back pain who was at 10 rows away for the New Year's '93 hood to have interesting opinions about the music. Just like I wasn't there for any of I wasn't there for Rite of Spring when it was premiered, and I have strong opinions about it. So I just don't listen to the morons who will tell you that you need to be older or taller or have more money or less money or what the hell ever hoop they decide to make you jump through to justify them not putting anything out into the world. So just keep doing what you're doing, because we need more of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.